Joining us now in the studio, Paul Musgrave, an Associate Professor of Government at Georgetown University in Qatar. Good to see you again, Paul. Tehran now says that diplomacy has failed. So what's its strategy? Is it trying to force somehow Washington back to the table, or is there a table?
Well, there's always a room to negotiate, there's always a room to talk, but sometimes countries negotiate through exchanging blows. What we're seeing here now is both parties coming, I think, to a better understanding of what their ultimate objectives are. For Washington, it is now clear that that involves the Strait of Hormuz, it involves Iran's nuclear program. You see, however, President Trump talking more about the military solution to the nuclear program, about that nuclear dust having been buried and so forth. For Iran, their objectives seem to have grown substantially since February. Instead of talking about preserving their nuclear and missile programs, they now act and sometimes speak as if it's their destiny almost to become the rulers, the dictators of the Arabian Gulf.
The US says that these are limited strikes in order to protect shipping and to ensure that the Strait of Hormuz remains open. But at what point do limited actions become an open-ended war again?
Well, I think that this is where it becomes very important to look at who's striking what. The Iranians are striking civilian vessels transiting through, in some cases, Omani territory in an effort to control everything that goes through the Strait of Hormuz. That's different to what the United States is doing, which is, in fact, as far as we can tell, limited strikes on military targets or targets related to military technology. And then in exchange, the Iranians are attacking U.S. military bases, but also, for instance, Kuwait's offshore oil programs. That's still relatively bounded. We're not talking about wide-scale attacks, but it is something that does have the possibility of escalating still further.
But who is driving events right now? Is it the politicians, or have the militaries, particularly the Iranian one, seized control?
That really, I think, is the question on everybody's minds. And it does seem to be that the Americans are believing, or at least telling the world, that they think that the Iranian military and the IRGC, hardliners in the Iranian establishment, are trying to spoil the ability of all parties to come to a negotiated or accommodated outcome. You know, President Trump talking about there being agreements and then an hour later attacks. That's something that is very worrisome because it suggests that the people with guns are the ones who are able to upset the talks. Now, of course, it could actually be that Tehran is unified behind something that's a little bit more aggressive, in which case we have a much more complicated and aggressive situation on our hands.
Is there still a diplomatic off-ramp, or has what's gone on in the last couple of days changed the calculus now, both in Washington and Tehran?
Well, eventually everything resolves its way through a negotiated, diplomatic, some sort of practice-based solution. The question is, how far are we from that? And I think that people are right to be more pessimistic now than they were a week ago. Certainly the fact that Iran has extended its ability to conduct military operations to targeting specifically civilian and even Qatari and Saudi flagged vessels, that's actually an escalation in itself. On the other hand, eventually when you start looking at the assets, when you start looking at sanctions, when you start looking at what Iran's future is going to be, unless they intend to pursue a fully military solution, a unilateral solution that would involve much more force than they've been willing to use to date, eventually something is going to have to come back to some table somewhere, whether that's through mediators or direct talks.
So beyond what's happening right now, what's been happening over the past 48 hours, what should we be looking for over the course of the next 48 hours that will tell us whether this crisis is going to expand once again or might actually stabilize?
Well, one thing to look at is whether the targets that both sides are going after expand or remain the same. You know, traffic through the Strait of Hormuz has actually dipped a little bit, but that actually means that the Iranians have less opportunities to target anybody for attacks. If the Iranians and the Americans continue to attack relatively military targets, that says one thing about this. If Iran continues to apparently respect the period of mourning that Qatar is going through right now, that's a very interesting signal because it suggests some more diplomatic awareness about what's being targeted. But if we start to see large-scale attacks on civilian infrastructure, power, water, energy facilities, that would be very troubling and suggest something else. The third thing that I'm tracking very closely is where are American military assets? The United States has the ability to conduct this scale of attacks without surging more forces into theater. But if you start to see more ships, more airplanes, more bombers, refuelers, that would say something else, something much bigger is in train.
Always good to talk to you, Paul. Many thanks indeed for being with us once again. Paul Musgrave.